it's important to understand the moment that you're in, and it cuts against the very core of human nature to understand it, because I am totally convinced at my age that denial is the most powerful of all human instincts. 22 years ago, next month, I was in a plane that crashed, amazingly, in the Middle East, flying from Peshawar, Pakistan. The Khyber Pass was right after 9/11. I was going over to cover the Taliban, and something happened in the cargo hold, and we went down in the sand dune in Dubai. Obviously, I survived, but it was a Pakistan International Airways flight. And the thing that changed my life about that experience was something happened horrible to the plane. Like there was an explosion in the cargo hold, some debate about what it was, but it happened. And the plane starts dropping, and the wing appears to detach, the right wing. And the plane is like struggling for altitude and going up, gunning the engines and sideways. It's like 3 a.m. over the Arabian Sea. People are freaking out on the plane. And you can see burning from the wing. So it's like, it is time to depart the plane. So I hop up, and this male flight attendant stands right in front of me and goes, "Sit down, everything is fine, everything is fine." It was so demonstrably unfine, I can't even begin to describe how unfine it was. I think just out of pure panic, I ignored the guy, and I opened the door, and the slide went up, and I jumped into darkness with 4 other Westerners in the front. Everyone in the back, though, they were like, "Oh, everything's fine." And I thought, I've brooded on that for over 20 years. Why did he claimed everything was fine? The pilots, by the way, went right out the front windows. Whatever, good luck, guys. And I think he just couldn't metabolize the change. It was so awful, he just could not admit what was happening right there in front of everybody. And this really bothered me all these years, despite the fact it wound up fine for me. But then last year I read the biography, which I would recommend to everyone in this room, of Peter Wrangel, who was the leader of the revolutionary white forces during the Russian Revolution. Russia ceases its hostilities with Germany. He comes back to St. Petersburg, and the country's in complete chaos. And the Bolsheviks have decided that it's discontent within the army that we need to inflame. But get the guns, and the people who wield the guns, we need them. So the first thing they do is destroy all discipline in the Tsar's army, complete. So Peter Wrangel's just been on the front for 4 years. He comes back into St. Petersburg, totally civilized city, 2-hour drive from Helsinki. I mean, it is Europe, okay? Whatever anyone tells you. And he's wandering through, and soldiers are going crazy in the streets. And they're raping women. They're stealing at gunpoint. Soldiers in uniform in a monarchy which had not had any behavior like this at all. And Peter Wrangel just can't even believe it. These are his soldiers. He's a general. And he goes into a movie theater, and everyone in the movie theater is completely absorbed in the movie. There's no revolution happening outside. And Peter Wrangel thinks these people are insane. So he goes back. He's like, I got to get to Moscow. So he takes the train to Moscow. I have to tell the Tsar, this country's falling apart. So he goes back to Moscow, and he's close to the Romanovs. And so he goes into the imperial court, and he knows all the relatives, and there are millions of them, hangers-on. And he notices about 80% of the women in the Romanov family are wearing red ribbons in solidarity with the Bolsheviks, who wound up, of course we know how it ends, murdering them in the basement at dawn. So, wait, what? Peter Wrangel says, how is it that this country is being devoured by a violent revolution, and the people who can afford movie tickets, that is kind of our middle class, are refusing even to acknowledge that it's happening, and the ruling class against whom it is aimed are sympathizing with it? And if this doesn't remind you of BLM, I don't know what does. I'm reading this in my porch, midnight, I couldn't go to sleep. I was like, wait, I live in that country. That's happening now. This is a revolution. Its aim is to hurt you. Yes, that would include physically in the end. Sorry. If someone tells you you're not allowed to speak, if someone tells you your children are not your children, okay, these are not ideological differences. This is not, I prefer, this capital gains rate. These are totalitarian measures that treat you as non-human. Human beings, free citizens, get to say what they think. Slaves must be quiet. That's the distinction. So all this it's in the First Amendment. No. Yeah, it precedes the First Amendment, as our founding documents make clear. These are natural rights that distinguish the citizen from the slave, the human from the subhuman. We can't consider slaves fully human, or we wouldn't enslave them. So anyone treating you as a slave considers you less than human. People don't pause to consider the implications of this. If someone says to you, I have a right to make your children hate you or to say weird, creepy sex stuff to your kids. What's a valid response to that? I'm calling for applying natural law to American life. And if you refuse to do that, what happens? Well, we're watching what happens. They become increasingly aggressive. The aims are exactly like the means, totalitarian. Period. This is not a debate. They don't want a debate. They've said that explicitly, they don't want a debate. So I really think that we should begin to see this for what it is, which is a very big deal on which all depends, not just our republic, but like your family. And I'm not calling for stockpiling ammo, though. I mean, no one ever went broke doing that, I can say. Maybe some have, but they'll get it back in the end. It's a good investment. What I'm calling for is approaching this moment with the seriousness that it both deserves and requires. So you read that beautiful letter from, was it Lieutenant Blue? After whom a spectacularly dysfunctional public high school in Washington, D.C. is named, I should tell you. Poor guy, that's his legacy. Boys' room shootings. But you read that, and you realize a couple of things. One, this man was not lying to himself. He knew that everything hung in the balance. He was in the middle of a civil war, and he wasn't pretending otherwise. It was literally a civil war, but he knew that it was. It's one thing to be in a civil war, it's another thing to admit it. And he did admit it, okay? The second thing was his grave seriousness. He said, I'd rather die than be dishonored. He says that in the letter. This is a very serious person, maybe even a little self-serious. On the other hand, it's not just about me and whether I can show coolness under pressure or tell a joke facing stage 4. It's bigger than that. It's about my children and the grandchildren I fervently hope to have. And their lives require me to be a little more serious than the world I was raised in, which was honestly not serious at all. It was a very decadent world. I didn't recognize that at the time. Sort of well-educated, upper-income America. Very decadent, actually. Well, who am I to judge? Well, on the one hand, okay. Who am I to declare myself better than someone else? I'm with that to this day. I don't think I'm better than anyone else, and actually I've got a lot of evidence that I'm not. On the other hand, it is for me